Hello Goblin, my name is Mabobin, and I'm still working on that introduction. You're watching my review of Iron Lung, a 2022 horror game experience made by David Szymanski. To put it simply, Iron Lung is able to show you how simplicity can create some of the scariest horror. Iron Lung is a $5 game that is good at being a $5 game. Iron Lung is a $5 game made by someone who knows how to make a $5 game. Iron Lung is a $5 game that does not have the graphics of Death Stranding or The Last of Us Part 1. Iron Lung is a $5 game that is scarier than Dead Space. Iron Lung is a $5 game where I spent $5. The entirety of Iron Lung was made just by one person, David Szymanski. David Szymanski is known for making games such as Dusk, a game that plays and looks like Quake. He's also known for making Squirrel Stapler, a game where you staple squirrels onto your dead wife and you eventually meet God. He's also made the recent early access game Gloomwood, a thief-like where you have to escape a town. Iron Lung is completely different from these games, as all of these games are different to begin with. But I believe that Iron Lung's game design is so compelling that it's definitely worth pointing out its aspects. As we discuss throughout this review, I'll be exploring all of my thoughts and then we will eventually lead up to a verdict. Now this video works great if you have not played Iron Lung, but I highly suggest playing it if you are interested. It's definitely one of the best horror experiences that I've had in recent years. Iron Lung is a video game where you, a convict, are in the aftermath of an event known as the Quiet Rapture. From what we know about this event, as explained in the beginning of the game, it was when every known star-inhabitable planet vanished, leaving only those who were on space stations or starships. With supplies dwindling and infrastructure crumbling, survivors are searching for any trace of natural resources in a universe of barren moons lit by the ghost light of vanished stars. Now, one such moon holds a strange anomaly, an ocean of blood. You are a convict, tasked with exploring this anomaly in a makeshift submarine nicknamed the Iron Lung. It was not designed at all for this type of depth, and there was no training whatsoever. If successful, we'll hopefully earn our freedom. You really don't know why you're convicted or who it was that locked you up. In this game, there's really a lot of vagueness to it with not a whole lot of answers. During the entirety of Iron Lung, you're searching for remnants or some sort of answers as to why this is all happening, of course. And that's the genius of it, because it keeps you 99% in the dark with giving you barely any information. Now that we know a bit about this game, I'd like to start exploring all my thoughts of what I like about the game, and then we'll use those thoughts to see how they work in the game. Let us start out with the AAA graphics and style. As you've probably noticed with David Szymanski's games, they're styled like those of 90s video games. Now, I'm a huge fan of this style as they can age extremely well, as seen on Quake or Doom. Iron Lung is no exception to David Szymanski's list of games when it comes to the style. I personally enjoy the rusty red in the submarine clashing with the coordinates, depth, and oxygen reader. You can clearly tell from the rustiness that the submarine was not meant to last, and that, well, bad things are most likely going to happen. And this is the main aspect of Iron Lung's style that I personally enjoy so much. Based on the style alone, you can tell that at any point of this mission, the submarine could succumb to the depth. And although the submarine may just be a couple feet long, what is really great about it is that it's able to capture the feelings it's going for with great simplicity, which I think is a great feat. Now, although there isn't much to say about Iron Lung's style, I thought it was important to share this aspect that I like so much because it helps out the game in many ways. Another aspect of the game that I like so much is in the next section: the beyond enjoyable and robust mechanics. Seeing how far down you are in the ocean, the depth would create too much pressure on the submarine if you left the front window open. Because of this flaw, it has to be closed entirely. The mechanics of Iron Lung consist of smacking buttons to move on a 2D axis. You have a forwards and backwards button, a left and right rotation button, which both affect the coordinate display, moving you on the map. But as you can see from the map, there are some obstacles you're going to have to get around, such as narrow caves. This brings us to the radar. This tells you when you're near a wall, preventing you from death, as if you get too close, you die. The radar will go off, making this beeping sound with a green sphere telling you which direction the obstacle is in. Then there's a terminal that we don't know too much about. We'll talk about this later. Yes, I'm foreshadowing this extremely important aspect of the video game. I really bet you did not see that coming. Finally, the last aspect of the game's mechanics is the button on the back of the submarine, which you use to take pictures. Now, this is arguably the most important aspect of the game, as it's the whole point of the game to take pictures at 9 separate locations. It's up to you to traverse through this map and get to these locations and take the pictures. Now, the main problem with the game is the fact that you can't actually see where you are on the map, so you'll have to constantly be looking at the map and the coordinate display to see where you are. Once you reach the location's coordinates, you can take the picture and observe what it could be. Now, although the style and mechanics may not have too much for it, it lets David Szymanski really focus what he's striving for in this game: the emotions. In other words, the simplicity has you overlook it to focus on the true emotional value the game has to offer. Now, with that being said, let us move on to one of the biggest aspects of what makes Iron Lung, the feel zone. The feelings Iron Lung gives you is extremely important to the experience, as it's the main reason why I find this game to be so impressive. To really put it in perspective as to how Iron Lung makes me feel, I want to talk about a game it reminds me of: Presentable Liberty. In Presentable Liberty, you awaken in a jail cell, unsure of why you're here. Similarly to Iron Lung, Presentable Liberty is a 1-hour experience, lasting a total of 5 in-game days, with things becoming more dire the closer we reach that 5th day. In Presentable Liberty, you're given notes by people, and throughout the game you get to learn about them and what's going on in the outside world. Just like in Iron Lung, there really isn't much hope left for humankind. The population is dwindling because of an infection which is spread throughout 98% of the population. That's a lot of population, and you're one of the few who remained untouched by it. You spend the game alone, wondering if what's happening is real or not. The people that send you letters you've never met before, and could easily be fake, as letters send mere moments after being written. During the story of Presentable Liberty, you learn more about the people that send you letters, one of which being a woman by the name of Charlotte. It turns out that she, like us, is not infected by this mysterious disease, and has had to lock herself out from society. Seeing how she has no one to talk to, she contacts us in the hopes that we meet. Charlotte is an owner of a pastry shop, and it just so happens that the shop is near our cell. So nearby that when she plays her gramophone, we can easily hear it. During the time in the cell, she repeatedly talks about how she wants to visit us. While each day goes by, she gets more and more depressed. She starts sending concerning letters that she cannot continue to wait. Because of this disease, everyone around her is dead, and the streets are filled with blood. Unsure if anyone is still out there, she tells us that we need to visit her soon, and gives us until tomorrow evening to get there. Otherwise, something bad will occur. Knowing that we're still stuck in this cell, we feel a constant wave of hopelessness. There's not a single thing we can do, and the only option is to wait to see what happens. Eventually, the next day, our friend Salvador, an old friend we had before imprisonment, comes to the rescue to escape us from the jail cell. While each moment passes, the anxiety fills us as we don't know if we have enough time to get to Charlotte, seeing how nighttime is quickly arriving. We don't know for certain if Charlotte or Salvador exists. All we can do is cling to the hope that these people are still alive and wonder what is going on outside our cell. The warden of the prison, Dr. Money, was actually the cause of the entire infection. See, the infection targets the person's organs, causing organ failure. Dr. Money caused this infection so that he could sell infected-free organs to people for ridiculously high prices. And he keeps us in the jail cell as we're one of the few who remains uninfected. As we wait for Salvador, he updates us on progress, filling us with more and more fear of what might come. But before he can release us, we receive a bloodied note from Charlotte that reads, "I'm sorry." This note has several implications, but we have to remain to the hope that there's still enough time to get to her. Afterwards, Salvador turns the power off, leaving the backup generator to fill the room with red light, simply foreshadowing what is to come. All of a sudden, Dr. Money sends us a note telling us, "Your friend tried to destroy the generator. That didn't work out too well for him, did it? He got electrocuted. Your friend is dead." At this point, our friend Salvador is dead, and Charlotte has sent us a note implicating that she has committed suicide. Fear, anguish, and isolation fills us all at once. All we want is to escape the prison, to see if our last hope of humanity is alive, Charlotte. But before we can leave, Dr. Money sends us one more letter. "What do you think leaving will accomplish? This town is dead. You and I are the last ones here." At this point, you're left with a choice to either stay and most likely die by Dr. Money's hands, or leave. We leave our cell to see a hallway with normal-looking doors rather than metal bars. After walking down the hall, we find a keypad laying on the ground, which reminds us of the wires that were in the jail cell. We return to what we thought was a jail cell to figure out that it was an elevator the entire time after inserting the keypad. After an extremely long elevator ride, we exit the building to see Charlotte's pastry shop, dimly lit. As we enter, we see that we were in fact too late. The loneliness consumed her, causing her to commit suicide. Presentable Liberty forces you to live in a world drowned by isolation, giving you anxiety of not knowing what is real or not, and, well, filling you with hopelessness as all the people that you've gotten to know reach their untimely demise. Iron Lung really has the feelings of isolation, anxiety, and hopelessness that Presentable Liberty captures so well. Each of these emotions are key to why I think the game is worth remembering. It allows Iron Lung to deliver a punch at every single second of the 60-minute experience. Now, I want to talk about each of these emotions separately, showing you how each emotion is important in the experience. First, let's talk about isolation. In Iron Lung, you never see or meet anyone. There is no human contact other than a man on the radio in the beginning of the game.
40 seconds. Stand by. I'm seeing some voltage irregularities in the instruments, so keep an eye out for sparks or flames or anything like that. Approaching maximum depth. The hole's feeling it, but it's still holding strong. Closing porthole shielding. We're starting to lose radio signal. You'll be at cruise depth soon, so receive and be careful. You're on your own. Good.
After that, you're left there with no help or communication. You're left standing there as the silence creeps in, filling you with emotions. This is when the first of many negative emotions kick in. It's just you in a moon's blood ocean. Nowhere is safe, and there's no one to help you. You are isolated from the rest of society. Loneliness is just a seed that blossoms into so much more emotions. As this all sinks in, fear slowly begins to emerge. This paranoia leads us to our next feeling: anxiety. As the emptiness gets to you, paranoia fills inside of you. The smallest of things, like the oxygen meter going down, scares you with ease.
Oxygen notification.
But then thoughts emerge. You have no idea who it was that locked you up or why they did it. You're in completely unseen territory with no information about what could or could not be out there. It's just you, alone. Or not. Unknown sounds haunt you, triggering your anxiety. It toys with your imagination, making you unsure if what is out there is living or not. Things like the oxygen depletion meter or even just taking a picture scares you even more as the game progresses. Eventually, at any point of the game, you can discover this note, beginning with, "This is not an expedition, it's an execution." Immediately you realize that this was not meant to be a successful mission, so you continue reading further. When they put you in here, they don't want you to return, and even if you do, and even if they do keep their promises, what freedom waits for you? A few dying ships and a sea of dead stars? After reading this letter, you begin to question that even if you do succeed in this mission, and even if the people keeping you as a convict do let you go, what awaits you afterwards? The anxiety from this letter guides you to the realization that whatever happens for the rest of this experience most likely will not end well. This leads us to the final emotion I'd like to talk about: hopelessness. Although the game may be short, it's extremely effective in those 60 minutes. As each minute passes, you become increasingly hopeless. Everything that could go wrong goes wrong. When you're in the submarine piloting it, you realize how vulnerable you are. It takes ages to go left and right and to speed forward and backwards. There's no sort of defense for the submarine as it's already extremely fragile, and you're constantly reminded by this with pipes bursting. The submarine can get hit by the unknown, which ends up moving its position only for you to find out moments later when looking at the coordinate display. Then there's the creatures you could never explain, which roams around you making those unexplainable sounds. As you progress, the oxygen meter depletes, telling you that time is extremely limited. Tunnels become narrower and harder to navigate, causing the radar to go off because death is just feet away. Location sites become increasingly uncomfortable, with bones eventually showing up. At one point you might take a picture and see a fish's face hidden in the background. Even right as the game starts, you hear the eerie music play as you watch the waves of the blood ocean telling you that this isn't going to be a pleasant experience. The hopelessness that the game gives you comes from all the vulnerabilities that you have and how there's nothing you could do to stop terrible things from happening. Iron Lung may just be a 1 hour long experience, but it's one of the scariest 1 hour long experiences out there, which is saying a lot for how simplistic it can be. This makes Iron Lung, in my opinion, a very memorable horror game, which all stems from the creativity with how it goes about scaring you, as well as how it goes about playing with your emotions, all of which having very little behind it, Overall, it collides, making you feel how someone in Iron Lung's universe would feel, and transporting you in this barren and depressing world where you're in the shoes of a convict, moments from death. The music and sound design in Iron Lung helps enhance the experience, as it should with video games. Impressively, all of Iron Lung's soundtrack was made by David Szymanski alone. He was really able to use each track to, well, cause all the emotions we talked about earlier. Iron Lung really, in a way, reminds me of Stardew Valley, the 2D farming sim where you build up your farm while getting to know your neighboring townspeople. Now you may be asking how the hell Stardew Valley has any sort of resemblance to Iron Lung. Well, let me explain. To put it simply, both games manage to use sound design in unique and fun ways. Eric Barone, the creator of Stardew Valley, just like David Szymanski, created his entire soundtrack by himself. The Stardew Valley soundtrack is fantastic, and I really recommend listening to it if you haven't already. Fall music rocks. But the soundtrack was made perfectly as it embodies the feelings of the game that Eric was trying to convey in it. When you go from season to season, the environment changes, as well as the music, each with different tones and styles to them, really changing each season's experience to make you feel like you're in that specific season. My favorite example of which is the spring soundtrack. In spring, you're presented with extremely upbeat music because farming season just started, giving you that motivation to take advantage of the time you have. In other instances, caves get darker and darker toned as you get further and further down them, which also implies to the player that they're making some sort of progress. There's also the characters in the game that you can grow relationships with, some of which have their own theme that fit their personality. Stardew Valley is able to excellently use sound design to help sell the experience, helping to enhance the feelings that Eric Barone wanted the player to feel. And I really think it's the same with Iron Lung, as it helps transport the player into this barren universe with great sound design. With its many tracks of ominous and dreary music, such as Ghostlight, which is the very first track you're introduced to when opening the game. I feel like it's a great introduction as it perfectly sets the tone. Then there's the alert for the oxygen meter, reminding you of the time that you have, and even the sounds from the movement of the submarine, which, as I said before, builds tension. Another main aspect of audio design that I love so much in this game, that we actually talked about before, is how just by using audio, the game deceives you. In the beginning of the game, for instance, you come across these weird-looking tubes that create this unsettling sound. Before taking a picture of it, you're unsure if what it is alive or not. When you take the picture, you have a moment of anxiety, but then the picture prints and it's just plain old tubes. The game tricks you just by making noises that sound like it could be some sort of unknown entity. Just like Stardew Valley, all of these audio designs have an important purpose for the overall experience. And honestly, this is why I made this section. I find that Iron Lung, just like Stardew, shows the potential that developers have. It's crazy to me how well done the audio in both games were done, with just one developer making the audio as well as the entire game. Although the audio design isn't one of the biggest parts of these games that makes them so great, I thought it was a good factor to focus on as it can be incredibly impactful to the game's experience. Now that I've talked about every aspect that I think is integral to Iron Lung, let's use these key aspects to see what makes the game so fantastic. Now I want to clarify that we will be narrating this game to its fullest, but it does not necessarily mean that all of these key elements I was talking about happen in order. They all happen sporadically. I will be stating most of these occurrences as they come up, but it's up to you, the viewer, to find as many examples of these emotions as you can. Now let's finally delve into Iron Lung. I know we talked about this before, but when you start the game, you're presented with a blood ocean. What's important about this is, as a first impression, it sets in everything, and you're left sitting there, confused and unsure of what lies below. You press New Game. The title sequence that we talked about earlier appears. I left something unsaid earlier about this page though, which is the name for this terrible event that occurred, the Quiet Rapture. This will be essential for understanding the story of Iron Lung further in the video. After reading this page, you then press start and listen to the man on the radio, which would be the only voice you'd hear for this entire experience.
40 seconds. Stand by.
When you finally arrive towards the lowest depth, the man lastly says,
You're on your own.
you're left standing there alone in the SM-13. On the top left of the screen, you're given the game's special actions: move, interact, map, and briefing. You open the briefing and see that there is more information behind the mission. 2 weeks ago, we conducted an exploration of Moon AT-5 for the first time since the Quiet Rapture, leading to the discovery of a fourth blood ocean. A trench beneath the ocean's surface has several points of interest. Your task is to photograph these points of interest with the SM-13's forward camera. Photos must be taken within 2 units of the specified position and 10 degrees of the specified angle. You can also use the camera to help with navigation. Only photos taken at the specified points of interest will be saved. Since you can't navigate by sight, pay attention to your coordinates and consult the map. The proximity indicators next to the sub-controls will trigger if you're getting close to an obstacle. Good luck. After receiving more information on what your mission entails, you know what must be done, or at least what others want from you. You learn that this isn't the only blood ocean out there, implying that this is a pattern of some sort and that there are most likely more blood oceans undiscovered in this barren universe. Since you have no real control over the situation, you decide to voyage on to the first marker. Once you've finished reading the briefing, you take a look at the map to see that you will need to navigate a 90-degree turn to get to the first location. Although this isn't bad compared to the other locations, it's a challenging start since this is the very first time you've driven the submarine. As you traverse to the first marker, you hear a beeping on the radar. You're close to a wall. Just a little reminder to be careful. After getting around the turn, you finally make it to the first site. After taking the first picture, you see some sort of rock, but it's hard to tell. You couldn't understand based on how low resolution the camera is, but you come to the decision that it must not have much importance. After taking the picture, you don't get any sort of update. You open the map and see a green check mark reminding you of how bare bones this game is, and how little help you have. You continue the journey. Luckily, the voyage towards the second location isn't nearly as difficult, and it takes just a few minutes to arrive. Once you arrive and take the photo, you realize that it's more confusing than the last. But from what you can tell, it's eerily similar to the last picture, which reminds you of rocks or possible signs of life. As you look for the checkmark, you look towards the third site. Although it's still not the most challenging, it's the narrowest we've seen yet. At this point, we are growing accustomed and comfortable with our current situation. But as soon as we accelerate towards the tunnel, fear immediately enters the submarine. Whatever that was sounded as if it were alive. Suspicions immediately control your mind. Is there something else down here? Or could it have been a sound from the ocean? As you sit there stuck in the submarine, you finally calm yourself down and make your way towards the location. During the submarine's expedition, you are on edge. When the oxygen level goes down, you jump extremely easily. This is the first sign that the SM-13 is starting to feel the depth. As you get closer and closer to the coordinates, a sound starts emerging, and anxiety starts to fill once again. When you arrive to take the photo, you take a second to breathe, and then finally press the button. A dire moment passes until the monitor updates. From the looks of it, you're still uncertain of what it could be. It could be some sort of plant, or tubes, or even a man-made structure. There's obviously no answer to this, and once again, there's no choice but to move on. At this point, danger is looming. Oxygen just went down a level, and you're 3 out of 10 pictures down. The fourth image puts us in the largest cave yet. It's huge and reassures us as we won't have to listen to the radar for now, since it seems to be the safest area. As you're moving closer and closer towards the fourth location, the radar unexpectedly acts up. The submarine isn't near a wall, so it's impossible for the radar to act up, unless there was something else near the submarine. After this odd experience, you finally reach the 4th location and take the photo. As you examine it, you notice a figure to the right resembling some sort of face. Your first answer to what was causing the radar to act up previously. At this point, suspicions are turning into possible facts, as it's hard to believe we are not being examined by this creature. As you leave, you hear a loud bang coming from something outside hitting the submarine. The 5th location is close by, and it's no challenge to get to it. Once getting to the site, you take the photo and see bones from what used to be a creature. Could it be what you saw in the photo, or is it an entirely different species to begin with? After examining the bones and not being able to come up to any sort of conclusions, which is something we're growing quite accustomed to, we set off to the 6th image. When getting to the 6th image, you must get through a very narrow tunnel. When you set off to it, you realize how much worse the mission is getting. When you reach the site, you hear a very weird noise for just a second. When you get aligned and take the picture, you see that it looks to be some sort of structure. It sort of looks man-made, which would cause many questions for the human race. The main one being, who could have built this here? Could it be that this blood ocean was one day habitable? Just as another pipe bursts, you leave the 7th location. The pressure is not only increasing on the submarine, but also on you, because you can sense that time is coming to a close. As you traverse, you hear a loud. You go back to the control terminal to notice that you're not exactly where you were. You were sent straight to the exit of the large cave, which is over 200 meters out from where we were. When getting closer to the 7th location, you hear another distant echo, but you keep persisting. The radar acts up again just to stop before you can think about taking a photo. You take the 7th image. A further amount of bones discovered. By this point, the entire bottom half of the map has been explored, and the rest lie at the top half. But there's a problem when you look towards the map. There's no pathway towards the final 3 images. But then, as you investigate, you realize there might be a path where the map is fuzzy. As you make your way towards the unseeable tunnel, you get another oxygen notification. There's only 2 levels remaining, and you start realizing that there's not much time left to complete this mission. When you quickly arrive to the unseeable tunnel, you take a picture to gather your bearings. You can see what looks like some sort of wall or structure. It's very hard to see, but there's just enough detail to see that there is indeed a passageway. As you enter the tunnel, the radar starts going crazy, and you feel the most amount of pressure by far. But just as things seem dire, you make it out and have an internal moment of triumph. You look towards the 8th site and plan your route towards it. As you get towards the 8th image, you hear something. It sounds like fire. As you turn around, you quickly realize that the SM-13 is on fire. You quickly get the fire extinguisher to take it out. You start spraying everywhere, and the fire slowly goes away. It wasn't actually until this point that I noticed a letter on the floor. It has been here the entire time, but I wasn't perceptive enough to notice it until now. I just want to say before we read this that this was honestly the perfect time to find this letter, because all of this hard work that we put in crumbles just at the sight of it. We read the first half of this letter earlier in this video, but now I'm going to read the entire thing. This is not an expedition, it's an execution. When they put you in here, they don't want you to return. And even if you do, and even if they do keep their promises, what freedom waits for you? A few dying ships in a sea of dead stars? If there is still hope, it lies beyond the veil. Hope in this void is as illusionary as the starlight. I will choose to breathe my last here, at the bottom of an ocean, unseen, unheard, and uncontrolled. They will get their execution. I will get my freedom. Even more questions emerge. This wasn't supposed to be a successful mission? Will the people who put us in here genuinely keep their promise? What type of freedom are we going to have? You sit here, even more hopeless, but without choice. Finally, you go and take the 8th image. It's straight ahead of you after getting through the hazy tunnel. Finally, taking the 8th image, you see more of the unknown, although not as questionable as the other things we've seen. When looking towards the 9th image, you realize that it's the narrowest one to get to in the entire game. As you enter the area, you start to hear a noise. It makes you pause for a moment, as you're quite unsure if you're hearing something at first. As you get closer, it gets louder and louder, and that, mixed with the radar continuously acting up, makes you, yourself, begin to tremble. The submarine begins to shake or have some sort of reaction to whatever it is. Another pipe burst. Finally, you reach whatever it is and realize, if you haven't already, that this is what we're supposed to take a picture of. You make sure that you're in rotation, and as you make your way to the photo, you question if some of the shaking from the screen is from the anomaly or from the fear that you have. The tension grows as you wait. Then you see it, a shining, unexplainable object. We then go back to our routine. There is nothing else we can do. There's no answers, just questions. You've been hit again, but somehow you've been hit out of the entire cave, which could take a minute to realize as you have to open the map many times, checking your coordinates. Afterwards, you start your expedition towards the final picture. Your radar begins to act up, but this time it's not stopping. You go in for a picture, just to see what it is that's next to submarine. An eye of a creature. Whatever it is that's been out there, following you, is now right in front of the submarine, watching. It hits the submarine once again. The radar quietens, and whatever it is now gone. You continue towards the 9th site. As you do this, an oxygen notification goes off. You're now at the lowest level. If you don't get this picture soon, then your demise awaits. You move closer and closer towards the final picture. You look down and see the blood ocean has made its way into the SM-13. Blood is starting to consume the submarine, and you. Demise was always the answer to this quest. There's nothing to do but take the final picture. You finally make it to the correct coordinates and go to take the picture. As you walk up, the Iron Lung title appears. The SM-13's journey has reached its end. Whatever this was that was trying to enter, succeeded. After the title appears, you are given one last piece of information. The expedition ultimately raised more questions than answers. Satellite images showed pieces of the SM-13 scattered all over the bottom of the trench, as though it had been torn apart by some huge beast. The wreckage cannot be reached at this time. No photographs have been recovered. The stars shine pale as bones. The moon is a lifeless corpse. Its ocean, a gaping wound. The universe, what's left of it, is dying. But somewhere in the void, there must be hope. Afterwards, the title screen appears. You may be under the impression that the entire game has been covered, but there's actually a lot more depth to it, as there's a mechanic that we have yet to talk about that I greatly appreciate, which is the terminal system. Some players may not even know of its existence, while others may open it with confusion, leaving it be afterwards. The terminal in the SM-13 is actually really important, as it adds a lot of depth to what's going on. By opening the terminal system, you're presented with COI Informational Terminal. This is a local database. Be sure to update before each descent. As it seems, this terminal has been updated before our descent, and many others before it. Using the terminal, we're able to search terms which give definitions and lore pertaining to the rest of human existence. From reading COI Informational Terminal, we can see that COI means something. Typing COI tells us, the COI is the Consolidation of Iron. It is a brotherhood of 3 space stations and 2 spacecrafts numbering at 257 people. They base all their decisions via popular vote. There is another group called Eden, which the COI consider to be a menace. Unsure of who Eden is, we type it, telling us that Eden is actually the largest man-made structure that still exists after the effect of the Quiet Rapture. It was formerly the main station for Mars, and it holds a strong populace of 468 people. By this point, 468 people is actually a lot. Remember, most of the human race is gone by this point. They believe in Martian patriotism and independence, which the COI consider to be a threat against them, which gives the impression that they want the rest of humanity. If they don't stand with their values, they're against them. The COI also finds Eden a threat to all collective well-being after the attack on Filament Station. After searching Filament Station, we find out that it was the 4th largest space station of the COI. It wasn't until 362 EIC when tensions between the COI and Eden erupted in a 9-day battle on the station. It ended unresolved when the Eden troops resorted to sabotaging the station's reactor, resulting in a critical breach. Afterwards, a redacted text shows up. We can only assume something happened there that we weren't supposed to know. Perhaps the COI did something that would question their ethics. The breach left Filament Station an uninhabitable base due to the levels of radiation. Prisoners taken during the conflict undergo conviction realization since then. They have until 381 EIC to repay their debts. EIC means Epoch of Interplanetary Colonization, which is an interstellar calendar standardization adopted with the establishment of the first Earth colony on Mars in 1992 AD, which marks 0 EIC. It is the predominant calendar used throughout the known galaxy. Before the Quiet Rapture, many debated using IMC instead, Interstellar Martian Calendar. This was popular since there was a large population residing on Mars. After the Quiet Rapture, everyone except Eden uses EIC, Eden of which uses IMC. Searching the Interstellar Martian Calendar, or IMC, informs us that whereas EIC is based on the rotation of Earth, IMC is based on the rotation of Mars. 1 year on Mars is 1.88 actual years. Finally, searching the Quiet Rapture, it tells us that in 357 EIC, so the year 2349 for us, without any prior warning, all contact with respective planets suddenly cut. No one whatsoever can recall having visual contact with any planets when this incident occurred. After the coming months of the investigation, it was determined that all known planets with sentient life were gone. All that's left is uninhabitable moons and asteroids. There are theories people made correlating it to religious interpretations, such as literal rapture, some unknown quantum anomaly, or something more cosmic and sinister. Some people believe that this means that some sort of religious group summoned the rapture. Searching Mars tells us about how it has been the most populated planet in the solar system. It also tells us that people did not want to inhabit Earth. By 143 EIC, it had more people than Earth. Before the Quiet Rapture, people who lived here did not want to live on Earth, most likely because of global issues caused by humans. All that remains on Mars now is the Eden Space Station. Searching Monster or Fish tells us discoveries on Moon AT5, redacted, which could indicate that there may be life already discovered on previous survey missions. Searching AT5 tells us that it's in fact a moon. It tells us that to search blood oceans for more information. Searching blood oceans tells us that they are unexplained phenomenon that have been found on 4 different moons since the Quiet Rapture. Moon AT5 and Moon Z8 are the most notable of the 4, as they are under control of the COI. After researching the blood, they found out that the blood in the ocean is human blood. There's no information about where it comes from or how it keeps its liquid form. They end this by saying that the ocean on AT5 is of particular interest because redacted. Yet again, more information we don't have access to. Searching Moon Z8 tells us the site of one of the 4 known blood oceans and one of 2 moons under the control of the COI. Redacted. Moon Z8 was used for the realization of COI conviction, meaning that whatever was redacted at the AT5 search is something extremely important. If you recall earlier, when we searched for the filament attack, it brought up something called conviction realization, and Moon Z8 brings it up again. Conviction realization is arguably the most important part of the terminal database. When searching conviction realization, it informs us that it is a humane form of criminal justice used by the COI. Crimes are repaid by rendering service to the general collective. This is done by performing surveys, maintenance, or other similarly beneficial tasks. Redacted. It can be assumed that the redacted is talking about the blood ocean surveying or some other sort of inhumane treatment towards the prisoners. We can deduce by this that we were part of Eden and were captured during the Filament Station battle, and we have been sent to this blood moon for conviction realization. It's also apparent that the COI isn't as good as they make themselves out to be. We can only take what they say as a grain of salt, such as popular votes, conviction realization of course, and the Battle of Filament Station. Searching SM-13 tells us that it's one of the 4 in-service underwater crafts fashioned by the COI for use in conviction realization in the blood oceans. This confirms the theory that we are most likely from Eden. It's designed for deep liquid photography and analysis, redacted, which we can assume is something past related or our current mission. It then tells us that the rumors of the SM-13 and other similar crafts being used for so-called mob justice by way of forced suffocation or otherwise has been proven false. We can assume that the mission was never meant to be a success. Even if they did get all the pictures, they probably would have had us suffocate anyways. Now, it may seem like there isn't anything else to search up in the terminal, but there's actually one last thing that is extremely vital to understanding the lore. If we go to the map, we can see a fuzzy area near the last location in the game. If we get to the location and take a picture, we can see that there was another failed submarine by the name of SM-8. If we return to the terminal and search SM-8, it tells us, hopefully they don't redact this before updating the database. What most people don't understand is that not all subs are built equal. The SM-8 isn't a burner sub. It really is for exploring and surveying blood oceans. If they send you down in the Iron Lung, they don't give a fuck if you come back, or if the submarine comes back, because it's a pile of garbage and you're a piece of shit. You come back with photos. Great. You sit down there and suffocate quietly, even better. But if they send the SM-8 down, one of the scientists is piloting, and they all expect them to return. And now the SM-8 is in the blood ocean in pieces. No, not hit a rock pieces or sprung a leak pieces. It looks like something tore it up, and the weirdest thing is that nobody else seems surprised. We might have found the first planetary life since the Rapture, and they're acting like it's no big deal. I know you're next in line for realization in the Iron Lung, and usually that means you won't be seeing the stars again. But they don't have an SM-8 anymore. They have 3 burner subs, and a lot of curiosity about AT-5, and maybe that means you have a chance. At this point, it's unclear if we were meant to survive or not. Originally, when the SM-8 was still in working condition, we would know for sure if we were meant to come back. But since it was destroyed, that means there was a chance they wanted us to come back. But this is something we'd never know for certain. One other thing, if you were curious, if you go to the last picture location before taking a 9th image, you can actually make it and see what it was we were attempting to make it to. From the looks of it, it seems to be some sort of man-made structure resembling a building or wall of some kind. Just like the other locations though, it leaves us in mystery with no suitable answers. Well, that's Iron Lung. All in all, it's a $5 video game that shows the potential one procures when making a video game, despite all of the limitations it has. Everything from its style, the ambiance, the emotions, and all the work behind it shows. Now, I know it's a bit much making such a long video on such a short game, but I feel like what it does well is extremely unique in contrast to the rest of the horror genre. I love how the graphics make you feel and how it foreshadows things to come. And although the mechanics are simplistic, it really helps you focus on those emotions. And the emotions itself is enough to convince me that I'm a convict in this blood ocean. There's also the lore from the terminal, which is perfectly vague when answering questions. It keeps you extremely interested and thinking about it weeks after. And finally, the most impressive part, and honestly the reason why I made this video, is how all of this fits in just one singular hour. Anyways, thank you so much for making it to this part of the video if you have already. I really appreciate it because this took me a long time to make. And as you can probably notice, this is indeed my first review on this channel. And although this video isn't perfect by any means, I'm really proud of it. I really wanted to start with something simple so I can slowly get used to making reviews and videos. This video was really informative for me in terms of just making reviews and also just learning how to pace videos, so I hope you guys found it concise and interesting all the way through. Anyways, I hope you guys had a great time watching this review of Iron Lung, and I'll see you guys later. See ya.